Willkommen.
Welcome.
I don't know how much we're allowed to sing without, copyright problems. So, keep it short.
We will sing all of it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a cabaret. Welcome to the Book Club for Movies. Amy and Samir here. It is Tuesday, April 13th, 2021. Today is Director Tuesday, and we will be talking about Oscar-winning director Bob Fosse. Fosse. Yeah.
I love him.
Fosse, and
I love his work.
Maybe the movie in particular we are going to be talking about. But happy Tuesday. Samir, how's your Tuesday going while I get us shared over here?
Oh, Tuesday. It's just another old Tuesday. It's fine. It wasn't especially exciting today, but the weather's been lovely. I will say that.
It's kind of dreary down here. It's a little cool and dreary.
Sunny with the breeze is a bit chilly here today, but I like a breeze. I love seeing the trees swaying out my windows. It's a lovely sight. I did see a crow fly right in front of my kitchen window while I was standing in front of it. That kind of freaked me out. Like, you got really close there. Keep your distance.
Is it an omen?
Oh, Luke. That's not the Fosse we're talking about.
Now. Yes, we will be talking about the fabulous Bob Fosse. Yesterday, for Man Crush Monday, we talked about two-time Oscar-winning cinematographer and another gazillion nominations, Mr. Roger Deakins. And Andres Gallego, one of our Patreons, joined us yesterday since this was his movie, and he's joined us once before, and he requested to join us. And he's always a joy to have on our show. But the movie he had picked was Blade Runner 2049, which is the film that Roger Deakins won his first, I have the names, won his first Oscar for after a gazillion nominations. Samir, what was it like watching this again?
So I actually did go back and watch Blade Runner and then watch this one to see. That's the final cut. The only thing I would have really cut out of that was probably that shot of the dove. But from the first Blade Runner. But I do feel like you need to have that movie fresh in your mind to really enjoy this movie, because there's a lot of things that have an emotional context that don't really come through if you don't remember them. So like I like the twist of the plot, with but that twist works better if you know Blade Runner. So it was like, okay, well, it's good to have my memory refreshed with it. I liked that this movie that they actually visually tried to do something a little different than the other one. Oh yeah, Jared Leto is always a problem. He's just problematic in general, I think. But so that definitely
his character was interesting in this movie. It was like, okay, I guess he's supposed to be the bad guy, just being that he's the head of his corporation, but then he's not even in it very much.
No, but he's definitely given a villain edit. Same with Love. The ironic name of Love for the violent assassin assistant. But I like that they actually thought about what the other parts of the world would look like, because in the first movie you're kind of just in that city, and so you get the color and the craziness and the grime and the grit and the glittering lights and everything mixed together. So it's like that movie creates such a unique world, and it's insular within that city, that we never really saw the rest of the world. So it's like, well, what does the rest of the world look like when we've gotten to this point? And of course, watching the first movie, it's set in 2019, which is eerie, and then this one's, 30 years later, and you see the waste of the world around it depicted. So you get a different visual sense that's mixed into the movie. So it's made to seem more like this cinematographer's work. It's like his own thing. He's not just repeating what was done before, which I was really happy to see, which I assumed he would do because he's a master. He knows what he's doing. But there were so many beautiful images throughout. Like it felt like he was probably like in a playground with all these sets and probably a lot of miniatures and CGI things to work with. But everything moved so fluidly. Like you never felt stalled in any way. I loved the cat people shot, the water reflections that were like in all of those moments. A lot of orange filters in this movie, I noticed.
Yeah, I think my favorite sequence in this whole thing is everything in Las Vegas, from when he gets there to when he leaves, and like the whole buildup of realizing that he's seeing Harrison Ford, and then they have like a mini fight in this nightclub with I remember watching this in theaters and enjoying it, but then when it got to that part of the film, which happens like almost 2/3 of the way through it before Harrison Ford shows up, I feel like.
Yeah, because I felt like we could have had even 2 movies, because it did feel a little long, even though it didn't like feel slow. It was long.
It was definitely long.
So I was like, it would have been fun to have almost like a trilogy of these movies, to have like, okay, here's up to the moment when he's like, oh my God, I think I am this kid, and then you have almost a whole other movie's worth of material for after that moment. There's like another hour and 20 minutes after that. So I'm like, oh, well, we could have like, it would have almost been cool to have like 2 movies out of this story. But for once, this poster, because on so many posters, I forgot where we learned about this, with the idea of the orange and the blue. Like every poster is using orange and blue combos because that color combination is sort of jarring to the eye and it draws your attention. So tons of movie posters have this color combo on them, whether or not that's reflective of the movie at all. But in this case, this poster is very reflective of the movie, because you get the gray, washed out blues of like this desolate, the cityscape has become even a little more desolate. And then you get to like the toxic wastelands, which are all orange. So I'm like, oh, this actually it's one of the few times I can remember where the poster wasn't just being manipulated to make you look at it. It was actually reflective of the film's visual style and the color schemes used to delineate between these 2 worlds. But I still think it would have been fun to have 2 movies, because I did enjoy it. I actually thought I don't think it's as great as the first Blade Runner. I think that movie still is above this one for me, but I really enjoyed this, and I thought I was like visually just completely captivated. I loved it's still a lot of dark shadows. He still knows how to use lots of darkness in this story. It didn't feel overwhelming. Like it didn't feel like he was relying on it as a crutch to like get darkness across in and of itself. But yeah, I would have loved to have even a little more of some of these other characters, like these sort of freedom fighters, who are trying to liberate themselves. Like I would have loved more of that story worked into the movie. So that's why I'm like, 2 movies, give me 2. There's enough here to make 2 great movies. Oh yeah, Sean Young. When I rewatched the first one, I was just like so mesmerized by that performance. So I was really happy to see Ana de Armas in this film, because she has a similar kind of quality, but it's hard to replicate, pun intended. Like Sean Young as Rachel, because she's just like the perfect actress for this kind of role. Like you can believe her as someone who's, a robot, and someone who is, quote, more human than human, as the brand of the Tyrell Corporation brand used to sell themselves as. So that is a tough act to follow, because it's like one of those great performances in science fiction film. But I was so happy to see Ana de Armas in this movie it took me a while to figure out that she was just purely like a hologram girlfriend and not like a representation of a previous girlfriend.
Like any hologram.
Yeah, this is one of the few movies where I felt like all the CGI and technological innovations and stuff, everything felt like it belonged in this movie visually. Nothing felt out of place. There's no moment where the camera sort of zooms in or cuts to a close-up or highlights some aspect of this technological world. It's all filmed and made a part of it in a way that feels totally real throughout.
Yeah, I really wonder if there's ever going to be a point where we look back at this film and think like, wow, like we thought the special effects in this movie were so outstanding, but look at it now. It hasn't aged well because like it's so good.
Right. Well, you know, the in the first Blade Runner, when I was rewatching, I was laughing at one point because there's like, you know, in this vision of the future, there's Pan Am is still in existence. Mm-hmm. So you see like the Pan Am like name on a building, like in multiple shots of the cityscape. And I'm like,
it's supposed to be the future. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, Pan Am is long gone well before 2019. Mm-hmm. So that's odd. So like in that sense, I'm wondering there wasn't a lot of logos of like known corporations or anything in this movie. So that I think will help it retain a timeless quality, if you will. But you're right. It's like there's some movies that you look back on like, oh, but there are other movies like when it's not that good, you kind of notice right away. Like you watch the first Harry Potter movie, when you saw it in the theater, you realize that Quidditch match looked terrible. You know, that was
I was 11. Good. I thought it looked great.
Well, I was a little older and I could tell that it was really bad, like computer game graphics and not worthy of a major Hollywood production. Because there were other movies that were doing CGI far beyond that and much more convincing at the time. It just seems like they skimped on the budget for that. But other movies like Jurassic Park still hold up when you watch them. Like,
yeah.
You know, I think it's a combination. You have to have a combination of practical and special effects in some way. And this movie and this like story, somehow it's almost like you can't conceive of doing it without having a lot of practical stuff somewhere in it. Mm-hmm. The first one, I mean, you had actually had little people playing some of the robots, which is probably a little not great. But but how else were you going to do that? But no, I really appreciate this movie for everything that it is. I liked it. Ryan Gosling is also a perfect actor to play a replicant because he's like he's like the Sean Young of this movie, basically, for me, because he's got that perfect quality of like stillness that can like read as robot or not fully human, but there's this tender emotional quality in the eyes and every subtle movement that's captured really well. His face is lit so well in this movie. Like Roger Deakins knew that he had a great landscape of the face with Ryan Gosling, like both blank and expressive at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so that's really what Sean Young brought to the other movie. And so I think he really stood in for that more than any of the female characters. So it was another little change and twist to the story that made it fresh. And I really enjoyed it. It was fun. It, like I said, a little long, but I also didn't feel myself like looking at the clock or having to take a break or anything. I just watched it all the way through.
Yeah, same. Well, thank you, Andres, for picking this movie as one of our Patreons. It was really great to watch this again since I hadn't seen this since theaters. Oh. But before we move on, and if you want to watch it, it's on HBO Max right now. Before we move on to Bob Fosse, it's time for Name That Movie. Now, today's should be easy, okay?
Better be. Is it today's movie? No.
It's not, but there's one that like we were actually just joking about it. I want to say yesterday. So, but that's not this one. So this one, let's get going. So again, you have to try to guess what the movie is based on the images. And here we go. So again, type it into the comments here. It's not Pulp Fiction, no. Yes,
there we go.
Andres, it's Anchorman. It's like, come on, people. Anyone who's from San Diego will know this, although they filmed very little of it in San Diego.
There's like one overhead like copter shot of downtown San Diego, and the rest is not there.
They filmed stuff like in Long Beach for the exteriors. Yeah, so that was that. And now this one, if you don't get this, you have absolutely no business watching this show. Okay.
Oh dear.
And we also, yes. Don't act like you're not impressed. Oh,
I love Lamp.
We seriously we joked about this yesterday. So especially if you're watching yesterday, like you have to get this. Okay, here we go. And I guarantee Samir's going to get this from the very first image.
Oh well. No, Gabrielle, please stay. Like, but we were joking about how easy it would be to get this particular movie because almost every image that you would choose for something like this would instantly give it away. And we even mentioned two of these specific things just offhand before we'd even seen these pictures. But the first two are like,
first two are dead giveaways. Now that one's a little hard to see, but that's not the important.
But I know what's going on.
Yes,
it's interesting the way they worked it in.
Kane.
There we go. See, the snow globe and the no trespassing sign on the fence.
They could just have these two, and people would get this.
So look, we got three people. They all got it at the same time, but Andres came in first.
If you guys didn't get it, we would just quit the show right now.
Like, there was not one person who could get it.
What have we even been doing this last year?
This last year. What everyone else has been doing, surviving.
In vain. Well, good. I'm glad you guys got that one. Thank you for playing, and we'll be back again tomorrow with that. All right, let's move on to today's main event. Mr. Bob Fosse. Oh, the thing's kind of blocking his... I'm going to remove our logo so we don't block his little face.
His little face.
Yeah, I don't think I could move the logo into a different... There we go.
There we go.
There we go. Bob Fosse. One of Samir's all-time favorites. I have to say I've only seen a couple of his movies. Well, he only made like 8 films, but I've only seen
a lot of movies.
Them. Yeah. But Bob Fosse was born June 23rd, 1927 in Chicago. When he was a child, he started dancing and was really good at it, and thought that he was going to be the next Fred Astaire. He was recruited into the Navy toward the end of World War II, but he toured as a dancer and a performer in the military. After that, he moved to New York City and started on the stage dancing. And he was with, he had this dance partner, Mary Ann Niles, and they performed regularly on a show called Your Hit Parade. And Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis saw them perform, and Jerry Lewis said, like, oh, this Bob Fosse guy's awesome. And he said, like, you need to be on the Colgate Comedy Hour. And so Bob Fosse really gives a lot of credit to Jerry Lewis for bringing him to Hollywood. And in 1953, he was signed to a contract with MGM and started appearing in films as a dancer. Nothing like a starring role. I remember seeing him in Kiss Me Kate. Later on Broadway, he was in The Taming of the Shrew version.
Well, Kiss Me Kate was a big deal because that was when they let him choreograph his own dance for the film. That was like his own work that you see in that scene, and him doing it, which is not something you see all that often now, where you get like a featured scene of his choreography and him doing the choreography, because his choreography is a signature. It's like a, fingerprint that you recognize instantly. Anybody who watches dance in any capacity, like, when you are watching a Fosse choreography. And this time, like, that was sort of like the stepping stone to him, like, really making it big. But before that, like you said, like, it was always like little scene here and there. He would have a little dance solo with someone else, but it wasn't like a big feature thing. Like, he was the reason Fosse's dancing in this movie, we got to go see it. It was like he was just one other person amongst other dancers.
I remember, if anyone has watched That's Entertainment, there's a clip. I don't know if it's in the first one or the second one, but they they show that scene from Kiss Me Kate, and they're saying like, oh, and here's blah blah blah, and Bob Fosse, and I think Gene Kelly is introducing it, and he makes some comment like, I wonder whatever happened to him. Like, this is just like him going on to amazing things. His career, I think there are a lot of actors where it's like they started in theater and then they worked their way up like now they're in Hollywood. His career, if anyone says that that's a hierarchy, which it's not, they're just totally different things. He went back and forth between, it's like he was in theater and then he went to film, and then with his success in film, he went back to the theater, this time as a prominent Broadway director and choreographer. And Samir probably knows more about his theater career than I do, but he also did a lot of choreography in movies. And then after that success, he got back into movies, except now he was directing them. His first feature film that he choreographed and directed was Sweet Charity, I believe, which I still haven't seen.
Shirley MacLaine,
who I love.
And he got that job because he directed the stage version of the show, and he wanted to direct the film version. Like, so he had to like really like fight for that job, I think. And then they like put a lot of faith in him. Like, oh, they basically bought, what he was selling, and like, okay, well, let's have him do it. And then the movie didn't turn out to be a huge success, financially speaking. So it became more complicated for him to get the big jobs that he would eventually get. He had to fight for those too. But he had made his name up to that point with things like Damn Yankees was like a really big accomplishment of his. He did the choreography of that. I think it was one of the numbers from Pal Joey, the Steam Heat number. It's like one of the most famous dance numbers with the three people with the hats. And, he sort of set himself up as a distinctive voice through his theater dance, in addition to the things he did on film, to get the clout to really direct his own Broadway show that he could then be hired to direct a film version of. And so when you get to the movie we're talking about today, it was like, oh, well, that was the last time he made a movie with Sweet Charity. It wasn't a big success. This is what happens when we let the theater director direct the film version. And so then when Cabaret comes up and it's like another famous theater show, it's a huge hit on Broadway, and they want to make a film, it was like his name now didn't have the same cachet that it did when he got the job for Sweet Charity. So it was not instantly like, oh, well, we're going to give it to him. It was like, no, we don't want to give it to him. He's difficult to work with. He's very vain, and he's kind of doesn't always have his shit together. It's like he had this reputation a little bit for not being able to manage a movie. And so in the Fosse Verdon show that somebody mentioned, Gwen Verdon really was instrumental in making these movies successes as well, because she was able to sort of bridge that space between Fosse's imagination and what he expects of the dancers and the actors. Of course, now Sweet Charity, we look back on it, it's like an iconic dance movie. There's so like the Big Spender has become like, everybody knows that number now. And if they could see me now, like the numbers from that show, like we know because now we have the movie versions of them to watch over and over again. But it stands up better than people gave it credit for at the time. I think it's a lot better of a movie than it was reviewed as. And even some people today don't quite consider it one of his better films. And there's only a few to choose from as it is. But I still think it's up there because all of those dance numbers are just amazing. Like the looks, the choreography, are like people have been trying to do it ever since. Like it's something that's constantly referred to when you think doing Fosse number. People kind of go to those dances from that movie more than the dances you get from Cabaret or the dances you get from All That Jazz. So little love for Sweet Charity we got to throw out there, but that was the precursor to his first masterpiece, as far as we're concerned.
So his second film was Cabaret, 1972, and I'm going to kind of skip over Cabaret and all the awards it won. We'll in a few minutes because it is the movie that we picked. But needless to say, people liked it and it was successful. And also that year he won.
Oh yeah, he's the only person. He's the only person to do this. He won the Oscar for Best Director for this movie. The same year he won this Oscar, he won Best Director at the Tonys for Pippin, which was another production that he fought with the songwriter on, Stephen Schwartz, who I don't actually like because I don't think he knows how to direct a show. He knows how to write them, but he always argues with the directors. And in this case, Bob Fosse fought for a totally different version or interpretation of Pippin on stage when he was directing it that Stephen Schwartz didn't like. And then in the end, Bob Fosse won the Tony for Best Director for Pippin. And in the same year, he also did a television special with Liza Minnelli, the very famous Liza with a Z, for which he won Best Director at the Emmys. He is the only person I can think of that. I think he is the only person who's in the same year won this triple crown of Best Director at the Oscars for film, Best Director of Theater for the Tony, Best Director in Television for this Emmy. All in 1 year, he did these things. An accomplishment I don't think anybody will ever recreate.
I don't think they will.
He beat Francis Ford Coppola for The Godfather for that director Oscar in 1972. Like, this was not just a fluke. This is how great that movie was.
Yeah. Again, we'll get back to Cabaret. But after Cabaret, his next feature film was Lenny with Dustin Hoffman, where he plays Lenny Bruce. Then he did All That Jazz in 1979, which is a film that we desperately wanted to include on this month's calendar. But as Samir mentioned yesterday, it's rarely available streaming. We don't know what the deal is with it. It's a movie where if you want to get it, you're going to have to buy it. You're going to have to order a DVD or I don't even think
and it's a Criterion DVD that you want. It's a great special edition, which I own. It also it's just like a mind-bending and genre like revolutionizing picture, that one, just like Cabaret was. And it's really almost autobiographical in a way, because it's really sort of like about him, because at the same time that he's doing Lenny, when he made Lenny, same time he's also staging and directing the Broadway production of Chicago. He's doing it at the same time that he's making Lenny. And so the movie All That Jazz is really about his own mental state and physical state at the time of trying to do all these things at once and trying to create in two different medium at the same time, and all the expectations that are built up because of the previous film winning all these Oscars. And, it's like that movie is, it is basically 8.5, the musical through the life of Bob Fosse. And it's brilliant and amazing. And it won an Oscar for editing, I believe, but you can't, like Amy said, like we cannot find it anywhere.
Yeah, we tried.
So we couldn't put it on the calendar because there's no way for you to stream it at all. And the DVD is like $30-$40. And great, that's $30-$40 I ever spent on a DVD, because it, has fed my soul and my imagination endlessly since I first saw it. It has some of the most legendary numbers in that as well. It's every bit the equal of Cabaret, and for some reason, no one will allow you to watch it online or streaming on your television. But I highly encourage you to buy it. Anybody who's watched musical theater knows that movie, and they know how great it is. But, the movie... But go ahead. Sorry. I get so lost in that movie.
Yeah, I know. You'll just keep talking about that jazz. All That Jazz. His final film was called Star 80. It came out in 1983. In 1987, Bob Fosse passed away at age 8 from a heart attack. So gone too soon. But I think did he have some substance abuse issues too? to help
he did. Well, he
was
that? Yes, they cover that and all that jazz also. But yeah, he used a lot of drugs, sort of like the kind of drugs that you expected instead, like Dexedrine and stuff like that. Things to keep your energy up, things to help you sleep. Lots of alcohol, lots of smoking cigarettes, like 2 packs a day kind of smoker. He was very hard on himself physically with his habits. He was not, faithful in his relationships, sexually speaking. Actually, in all that jazz, one of the actresses is playing basically herself with a different name in the movie. Like the character she's playing in the movie is who she is in real life in Bob Fosse's life. It was so crazy when you watch the movie, the life, their life and all the stories. But yeah, he really sort of hastened his own, like the downfall of his health with his own habits. So he was like, yeah, he just abused himself too much with the drugs and the alcohol and the smoking and everything in excess. It wasn't just like, oh, I have a cigarette at a party with my cocktail. It's like, no, you just drink a lot. And it was very sad because he is such a unique talent. Like, there's so many things that he's done that we don't even realize. Like, obviously, Michael Jackson's dancing was influenced by Bob Fosse choreography. The moonwalk basically comes from the dance that Fosse did in the Little Prince movie, when he took on a role basically to help, I think, fund some other projects he wanted to do. But that dance by itself, like, people don't even realize sometimes that it comes from the Little Prince, and that is really where that move originated. But there's so much of what you think of as dance now. When you think of Broadway dance, the pose you strike is one of those exaggerated poses that's typical of a Fosse choreography. Like, it's not just that your hip is like cocked. It's like there's an extra kink in your ankle and in your wrist, the way you hold your wrist, the position of your head, the position of your shoulder, like every single thing. It's like he sees a vision and he's like, okay, well, here's your body. So move this, do this. Okay, that's the image I want. And then you step away from it. You're like, oh, wow, that is like way better. Like, you sound like such a dick when you're telling me I'm just not doing something right. But then when you add all these extra touches to everything, it's like, okay, well, I see what you're saying. It's kind of like the same thing with Roger Deakins as a cinematographer. There's a perfectionist vision. There's a vision that he's trying to perfect. And the people who have to, be the models in that vision, who have to act out the vision, are the ones who kind of suffer the most. And, so he, if you were a dancer for Fosse, you worked really hard, just like you did for like Busby Berkeley. And, it was very difficult to achieve the look and the attitude. And without him teaching people now and showing them people's recreations of Fosse now, I feel like a lot of the time there's still a little something that's just not there. Like, if he had been there, he would have told someone, point that shoulder a little more, elbow out tiny bit, stomach, like he would just know the extra little thing to add to be like, there it is. And so it's like, some of that is just lost now forever, but the films preserve the best of his work, I think, or at least a lot of the best of his work that he did. And, I'm thankful for that at the very least. I wish he could have made more movies. I wish he'd lived longer.
Yeah. But certainly in the small amount of films that he did as a director, and I say small amount of films, if you look at his IMDb, he's got a ton of credits for being a choreographer. I think it's funny is his first thing that he's known for. He's actually listed, it's like Bob Fosse additional crew, which is what choreographer gets thrown under. It's like, oh yeah, he's just an additional crew member, that Bob Fosse. But today's film we picked is Cabaret. Now, yesterday with the red shoes, Samir used the expression desert island film. Like, if I was stuck and I had to bring a certain amount of movies with me, this would certainly be on the list for me. Cabaret came out in 1972. A female girly club entertainer in the Weimar Republic era Berlin romances 2 men while the Nazi party rises to power around them. And it's a musical. So this movie won 8 Oscars in 1973 was the Oscar year. Best Actress for Liza Minnelli, Best Supporting Actor for Joel Grey, Best Director for Bob Fosse, Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, Best Sound, Best Film Editing, Best Music, and then it was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Picture. It didn't win Best Picture because it had the great misfortune of being up the same year as The Godfather, which I love The Godfather just as much as the next person who's in the movies. I think it's great. I love the trilogy. It's I love it. But which movie would I want to win and think has like just the emotions, the emotional roller coaster you go on?
This one.
Cabaret. Pass Samir over there. Cabaret. Oh my God. And I haven't even seen, I've never seen the stage musical of this. I know. Now, the clips I've seen of it, I have kind of, and I love this movie so much. I feel like I won't like the stage musical because it's so, he adapted this movie in such a different way from the stage where even like the way the musical numbers were presented, Liza Minnelli's character is like, every time I see clips of someone on Broadway playing Sally Bowles, I'm like, ah.
Well, yeah, because the character of Sally Bowles is supposed to be like, the tragedy of her character also is that she's not really that talented. She's not that great. She's deluding herself that she's that great.
Yeah.
And so somehow in this movie, you get both the delusion and it feels real, but you also are seeing Liza Minnelli deliver one of the great knockout star performances ever recorded on film. Like, there's no other film debut quite like this, except for like Marlon Brando in Streetcar Named Desire. You know, like it's that level of legendary.
So I watched this movie this past weekend because I'm not at my house right now, and I wanted to make sure I watched it on my big, I had recently purchased this movie on Blu-ray because I only had it on VHS, and knowing we were going to add this, I said, okay, I'm going to go, you know, it's time for me to upgrade. So I watched it this weekend and I was so sad watching this, besides just like the actual movie, but there was something else too where I thought, Judy Garland never got to see this movie. She died a few years before this and she never got to see her daughter in this amazing performance and like all aspects of like her actual singing, her dancing, and of course her acting.
It's tragic, but I think part of that is why it was just like such an epic moment on film for her is because it's like, this is the daughter of Vincent Minnelli, who's made some of the greatest masterpieces of filmmaking we've ever seen, many beloved classics included in them, and the daughter of Judy Garland, one of the greatest performers ever to grace this earth. Like, and their child made this debut. It was like written in the stars for this to be this way. And everything, like everybody got exactly what they hoped for out of her in this movie. Like everyone kind of expected her to be this amazing, and she exceeded everyone's expectations with it. You know, the funny thing about this movie, because this movie is very like sort of, it's part of that early 70s, slightly sexually liberated Hollywood, you know, that there was like this brief period right then where it was like movies had this freedom to be a little bit more sexually adventurous and free and liberated. And so this movie is kind of part of that. And at the time, also, the rating system only had G, PG, and R, and then like
this is rated PG technically.
So this movie is rated PG because there wasn't a 13, and nobody at the time, because of this sort of liberated vibe going through Hollywood in terms of how to present sexual characters and their sexuality on screen, it was like, well, this isn't an R. Like, this is no. So it got, the only other option below R was PG. And of course, in the modern day, when I started working at video stores, our rule was that you could only play movies that were PG or below in ratings. Well, Cabaret, because of this miraculous brief period in which it was produced and the limitation of the rating system, meant I could play Cabaret at Hollywood Video whenever I wanted. And if anyone complained, I'd be like, we're allowed to play PG movies. I played this at the airport. I used to work at a little station called In Motion Pictures that now is just a place where you buy things to watch movies on planes and stuff, but you used to be able to rent a little portable DVD player and you'd get a choice of movies with it. Well, same rule there. We had to watch PG or less. And so if you went through San Diego International Airport for about a year, when I was working there, I would play this movie frequently. So you'd walk through and there'd be me with Cabaret playing on the TVs
and
where you're
I
getting your
appreciate
tickets.
it walking through, like,
right? I wish somebody had, and I was like, and so, you know, my boss was like, is it PG? I'm like, yes. He's like, okay, it's fine. He'd never seen it. He didn't know. He didn't know what's going on in this movie and that there's drag queens in it at urinals, and like it's just like this. It's not like they're trying to make anything seem super freakish. It's just that this is the world, and you're seeing it just, you know. I mean, other parts of it that are made to look slightly freakish and grotesque, but in terms of character sexuality, that is normalized. And it was one of the first movies, kind of a major Hollywood movie, that you see where there are gay characters and queer characters, and they're not sort of highlighted as weird or out of the ordinary. They're like the most like sane people, or at least are the people that you're intended to identify with and not fear in any way. So there was that aspect of it too. And of course, there's a great moment in this movie for anyone who hasn't seen it between Liza Minnelli and Michael York, their characters in the film. If you haven't seen the movie, I don't want to spoil that moment because it's so good. So do I.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sally, people don't ask questions like that. I do.
I do.
Yeah, I do. Oh God, I was gonna paint my nails green this week. This week too.
Divine decadence.
Divine decadence, darling. This
you should have told me. I totally would have done that today.
This movie is just a emotional ride of like delight and sorrow and dread as you watch. Again, this takes place during the rise of the Nazis. As the way that builds throughout the movie. First, like, you don't even think about it, and then it just becomes a bigger and bigger part of this film. And
well, it's so brilliant, the structure of this movie, because it understands what a musical is and what it does for a viewer. First and foremost, you can't make a movie like this if you don't understand how to make a musical and how an audience receives it. So you get this elation and this build up emotionally with songs. And at the same time, you're going to a musical to escape reality in some way. You get doses of it to make you feel emotionally for the characters. But essentially, the musical form is one that gives you pleasure. And so applying that form to the story of the rise of fascism prior to, in Germany and Nazis taking over the country, so there's a way in which all the exalted emotions and the heightened states of emotion that's going on at that time perfectly suit the heightened state of the musical form. But at the same time, the reality that you have to slip in to give you the emotional weight that keeps you, really tied into the story is of such dire, drastic, like tragic circumstances that you get that moment and the movie like punctures that balloon. It builds you up. It knows exactly to build you up. And it's like, well, this is the reality that we're dealing with. Pop. This is the reality. Pop. So you're never allowed to, he gives you the moments that you want out of a musical at the same time reminding you of what musicals traditionally help you escape from in some way. And it all works. That's the crazy thing, is that it works. On film, it's hard to make something like that work. I don't even know how he did it, but you get these amazing moments. Like, you sing these songs with pure joy and exuberance and excitement when you think of them. Like, you sing and dance and you want to be in the Kit Kat Club.
Yeah.
And then you realize that there's, a Nazi collecting for money in your club.
Yeah, there's a whole different experience of, especially, it had been several years since I had seen this, even though this is one of my, but it's just because I had it on VHS and I would have to like my TV doesn't even, I can't even plug my VCR into it anymore because it's like a new TV. It's like outdated technology or something. But of course, in the years that I hadn't seen this, I have the soundtrack and I've listened to this so many times. I did a little song cover of Cabaret it's on my YouTube channel just for fun. And it's like you forget like the context of when these songs are performed. It's like a song that I would put on, I'd be like, oh, this is from Cabaret, I love this. And then watching it in the movie is like, this is so depressing.
The best example of his approach in this movie to how he uses the musical form is Tomorrow Belongs to Me. Because on the stage in that number, it's not done the way it is in the movie where they're in a beer garden and all that. In the stage show, it's at like a birthday party for, there's a character who's like a grocer and he's Jewish and he falls in love with the woman who owns this apartment house that the characters are living in. And they realize obviously they can't be together, even though they both love each other, they can't be together because of what's going on in the country around them. And he knows, he can see what his future is. And but there's a moment where it's like his birthday party, and then one of the other people that lives there, who they think is like, you know, one of the friendly people, she starts singing the song, playing it on an accordion at the birthday party. And that's when like some of the people at the party, like a bunch of people sing along with it, and others are like, oh God, I know what's happening. But the way they do it in the movie, if you only ever listened to the soundtrack, that it's the most beautiful song. I learned the song from listening to the CD before I ever saw the movie. And I was like, I mastered that song. I thought I was singing this beautiful song, but something about the lyrics did seem kind of odd. Very German, you know, in a way. And then you see the scene in the movie and it's like, you are like totally buying into that beauty. It's so brilliantly done. If you haven't seen the movie, that moment will chill you to the bone.
It will. One of many moments, but certainly, oh God, I can't say enough about how much I absolutely love this movie. And you guys better watch it tonight. And as I mentioned earlier, unfortunately it is only available to rent right now, but it is so worth it.
So worth it.
Especially if you haven't seen this, or if you haven't seen it in a while, or if you've seen it so many times, but you just rent it. Just do it, people. Pay the $4. It's so good. Ugh.
I'm gonna watch my Blu-ray of it because this is one that I do. Another one I actually own. I think I've owned every version of the DVD of this movie.
Yeah, knowing we were putting this on the calendar, that was the final straw of like, okay, I've got to buckle. Like I technically already own this, so I don't want to rent it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and upgrade to a Blu-ray copy. But please watch this. It's just absolutely phenomenal. Really one of the greatest films ever made. Ever.
Truly.
Yeah. So good. But please watch it. Again, only available to rent. Sorry, we tried. They're actually, this week, compared to all of our other weeks this month, there are a few rentals this week. This is the worst of it as far as rentals go. I think prior to this and then the rest of the month, we don't have as many rentals, but I think there's like 3 this week. So sorry about that. But just do it.
Please
watch it. Please watch this film. Join us tomorrow when we discuss Cabaret after the fact, after everyone watches it and falls in love with it. And then we are moving on to Academy Award winner Anne Bancroft for our Woman Crush Wednesday for tomorrow. Thank you so much for.
Oh, thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Yeah. Yeah. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Hope you love Cabaret. If you watch Cabaret and you follow us on Instagram, take a screenshot of it and tag us, and we'll share it on our Instagram. Well, you'll get lots of exposure with our like 400 followers that we have on there.
But also, thank you for the comments, everyone, too.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Please consider donating to our Patreon, joining our Patreon. If you have money after renting all the movies we are suggesting.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's over in the comments. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you tomorrow.